So this lesson is called Shabbat Rest in the Covenant of Peace, or Shalom. The first line says reparations versus restitution and restoration. So it's talk going on now. I don't know if anybody's heard it, but they're talking about reparations a lot.
Yeah.
It's a what's it? The hashtag ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, and it's like some kind of movement that's going on, and people are talking about the fact that Black people need reparations for slavery and the things that went on, and of course, some segments of us have been fighting for reparations for a long time. The 40 acres and a mule that we were promised when we got out of slavery, that we never got. The fact that every other group that has gone, we were just talking about, Jewish people for going through the Holocaust, the Native Americans, most groups of people have gotten some type of reparation or some kind of assistance for the fact that, they were done wrong.
Right.
But our people have not received any type of reparations. It's just been, okay, it's over and continue to go on. So most people would agree, most people know that it's not going to happen or don't have really too much faith in that happening, but most of our people believe that reparations is something that should come and that we should get. Let's turn to Jeremiah 30. Jeremiah chapter 30. Start at verse 10. Jeremiah 30:10. And you do not fear, O Yaakov, my servant, declares Yahuwah, nor be discouraged, O Yisrael. For look, I am saving you from afar, and your seed from the land of your captivity. And Yaakov shall return and have rest and be at ease, with no one to trouble him. For I am with you, declares Yahuwah, to save you, though I make a complete end of all nations where I have scattered you, yet I do not make, though I make a complete end of all nations where I have scattered you, yet I do not make a complete end of you. But I shall reprove you in judgment, and by no means leave you unpunished. For thus said Yahuwah, your breach is incurable, your wound is grievous. No one pleads your case to bind up. There are no healing medicines for you. All those loving you have forgotten you, they do not seek you. For I struck you as an enemy strikes, with cruel chastisement, because your crookedness is great, your sins have increased. Why do you cry about your breach? Your pain is incurable. Because of your many crookedness, because your sins have increased, I have done this to you. However, all those who devour you shall be devoured, and all your adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity. And those who exploit you shall be exploited, and all who prey upon you I shall make a prey. For I restore health to you, and heal you of your wounds, declares Yahuwah. For they have called you an outcast, saying, this is Zion, no one is seeking her. Thus said Yahuwah, see, I turn back the captivity of Yaakov's tents, and have compassion on his dwelling places. And the city shall be built upon its own mound, and the palace stand on its right place. And out of them shall arise thanksgiving, and the voice of those who are laughing. And I shall increase them, and shall not diminish, and I shall esteem them, and they shall not be small. And his children shall be as before, and his congregation shall be established before me. And I shall punish all who oppress them. And his prince shall be from him, and his ruler shall come from among him. And I shall bring him near, and he shall approach me. For who is this who pledged his heart to approach me, declares Yahuwah? And you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. So Yah is talking about his people going into captivity, and how he scattered his people. And he said in verse 12, he says, your breach is incurable and your wound is grievous. No one pleads for you, for your cause to bind up, and there's no healing medicine for you. So he's basically saying you're going to be put in this condition and nobody's going to help you. You're going to be in this condition and you're going to find yourself, first he says your breach is incurable and your wound is grievous. It's not something that can be repaired. And he says that nobody's going to plead for you or to bind you up, and there's no healing medicine for the situation that you're in. And then he says, why do you even cry about your breach? Because this is incurable because of your crookedness. So today, like, our people are looking for reparations. They're looking for a way to get out of our condition and how we can be built back up. But y'all already said a long time ago that it's not, it can't be. There's nobody that can do this for us. There's nobody that can heal our condition. They can give us money and give us whatever, and our condition before y'all will be the same. Right. Because we have not been restored right to Him. So there's no reparations based on what people are expecting from the world is reparations. For y'all, what he starts to say here, he's promising us restitution and restoration. Mm-hmm. He's promising us restitution and restoration. He's bringing us into a place of, we talked about on Shabbat how one of the definitions of shalom is restitution, bringing something back to a place of restitution. Meaning, if something is missing, like say if I take something from you, sometimes people have to pay restitution to the government because they may have taken they had tax fraud or had some kind of something, and you have to pay restitution and pay back what you defrauded the government. So you have to pay that back. We talked about on Shabbat how when they talked about shalom, it said that like say if you took an ox or took did something that took away from someone's household or whatever, you had to give restitution and put it back. So that shalom is the putting back what was taken. So Yah is promising us restitution, and He's promising us a restoration as a people, which is far beyond what reparations can do. Reparations will be like putting a Band-Aid on a wound. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So He tells us your breach is not curable, your wound is grievous, and there's nobody that's even pleading for your case. And we see that as being present right now. Like nobody's there's no nation saying this is not right. Mm-hmm. We need to fix this for these people. They're shooting people down in the streets, and people are in ghettos, and people are going through all kinds of things, but there's nobody pleading the case to say, how do we help these people? Mm-hmm. And this was intended to be this way. This is what Yah said. But He says that I'm going to restore health to you and heal you of your wounds. Yeah. I'm going to turn back your captivity. And then He tells the process of how He's going to do it. Chapter 31, verse 1, it says, at that time declares Yahuwah, I shall be the Elohim of all the clans of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus said Yahuwah, a people escaped from the sword found favor in the wilderness, Israel, when it went to find rest. Yahuwah appeared to me from afar, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore I shall draw you with love and commitment. I am going to build you again, and you shall be rebuilt, O maiden of Israel. Again you shall take up your tambourines and go forth in the dances of those who rejoice. Again you shall plant vines on the mountains of Shamaron. The planters shall plant and treat them as common. For there shall be a day when the watchmen cry on Mount Ephraim, arise and let us go to Zion, to Yahuwah your Elohim. For thus said Yahuwah, sing with gladness for Yaakov, and shout among the chief of the nations. Cry out, give praise, and say, O Yahuwah, save your people, the remnant of Israel. See, I am bringing them from the land of the north, and shall gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them, the blind and the lame, those with child and those in labor together, a great assembly returning here. With weeping they shall come, and with their prayers I bring them, and I shall make them walk by rivers of waters in a straight way in which they do not stumble. For I shall be a father to Israel, and Ephraim, he is my firstborn. He hear the word, O Yahuwah, O nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He who scattered Israel gathers him, and shall guard him as a shepherd his flock. For Yahuwah shall ransom Yaakov and redeem him from the hand of one stronger than he. So Yahuwah is laying out, and He's constantly laying this out through the prophets to let us know how He's going to bring us back. In verse 31, it says, See, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when I shall make a renewed covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Yehudah, not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I strengthened their hands to bring them out of the land of Mizraim, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Yahuwah. For this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Yahuwah. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts and write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall they teach each one his neighbor, saying, his neighbor, and each one his brother, saying, Know Yahuwah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. For I shall forgive their crookedness and remember their sin no more. So Yahuwah's talking about the covenant in Yahusha. He's talking about the renewed covenant. So he's talking about how our condition is going to be, and the restitution that he's going to bring, what he's going to give back, and what he's going to, how he's going to restore us. Acts 3:19. Acts 3:19 says, Repent therefore and turn back for the blotting out of your sins, in order that times of refreshing might come from the presence of the Master, and that he sends Yahushua Messiah, pre-appointed for you, whom heaven needs to receive until the times of restoration of all matters, of which Elohim spoke through the mouth of all his set-apart prophets since of old. So he's saying here, that Yahushua is going to come, and he has to go. First of all, he's telling them to repent and turn back, so that the time of refreshing can come. And he's saying that he's sending Messiah, but if right now Messiah has to be in the heaven and do what he's doing there until the time of the restoration of all matters. So he's saying here there's going to be a time where all things are going to be restored. And it says he spoke of these things through the mouths of all the prophets since of old. So the prophets, we just read Jeremiah, one of the prophets. The prophets of old have been talking about this restoration from a long time ago. And he's confirming that this restoration is coming through Yahusha. And when it comes, he's going to restore all things. He's going to restore the kingdom. So this promise we have is this covenant of peace, this covenant of shalom, this covenant of things being restored and made back whole. Turn to Ezekiel. Turn to Ezekiel 24. I'm going to turn to 37 briefly.
You said Ezekiel.
24. Now I'm turning to 37, but it's written in the paper. I'm turning to Ezekiel 24, but I'm going to read Ezekiel 37. And we read this last week. 37:26. And I shall make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant it is with them. And I shall place them and increase them, and shall place my set apart place in their midst forever. My dwelling place shall be over them, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And the nations shall know that I, Yahuwah, am setting Yisrael apart, when my set apart place is in their midst. So Yahuwah is saying there that he's making a covenant, he's establishing a covenant of peace with the nation of Israel. I'll come back to that one. But
Okay.
I'll let you know when I find that one. But it just talked again about the covenant of peace that Yah is establishing the covenant of peace, and it talks about how we will be made at peace with the different things, the environment, the animals, all the things. And he talks about how everything's going to be put back into a place of being restored as it was before, and how it should be. So the next line says, covenant is made with blood. We know that a covenant is made with blood.
Mm-hmm.
So when Yah makes a covenant, it's always, some kind of blood. Any type of covenant usually has some type of blood, something that's going on. It's either a sacrifice that's made. Apostle talked about on Shabbat how he cut the parts, and Yah walked through the parts to make the covenant. So he cut the animals in half and walked through the middle of it, and that signified the covenant. So anything with blood, the blood sacrifice, a lamb being sacrificed, is that blood. When he made the covenant with Moses, he sprinkled the blood over the people before he made it. So blood is always involved with the covenant. So peace is also made with blood. So when we turn to Colossians 1:20. Colossians 1, I'll start at verse 18. It says, and he is the head of the body, the assembly, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that he might become the one who was first in all. Because in him all the completeness was well pleased to dwell, and through him to completely restore to favor all unto himself, whether on earth or in the heavens, having made peace through the blood of his stake. So it says, through the blood of Yahushua, peace was established.
Mm-hmm.
So this goes hand in hand. So covenant are made with blood, and blood brings peace. So this again is all signifying this covenant of peace that Yah promised us. He has the covenant of peace. This peace is shalom, a covenant to bring things back to a place of shalom, wholeness, completeness, nothing missing. Shalom is filling in what's missing or taking out what is causing the issue. So shalom can be adding to, so shalom is completeness and wholeness. So sometimes you have to add something to it for that to happen. And sometimes you have to take something away for that to happen. If you have a family member that's missing, when that family member is brought back, then you have shalom, completeness, the wholeness, the family's together again. If you had a splinter or something in your finger, you're not, when it's removed, then you're brought back to a place of shalom and wholeness. Mm-hmm. So sometimes something has to be added, sometimes something has to be taken away. So through this process of Yah, because Yah's talking about restoring us, but he's the one that sent us into captivity. But through these captivities that he sent us into, and through the trials and the things that we've gone through, he's pulling out of us the iniquity. He's taking out of us the things that's causing us to not be at peace with him as we're going through this process. And then through Yahushua, through Yahushua and through us entering into this covenant, and he's removing the things out of us, the sin. He's dealing with the sin that's in us, that's causing us to not be at peace with him. That's causing us to be in a place of chaos. Then he's adding the things that are necessary for us to come to that place of shalom. So this long process that Yah is taking us through is bringing us that restitution and bringing us that restoration. So our people would love for reparations to just come to just, hey, get some money, get some land, go do what you got to do. But we have to be brought back to peace before Yah can grant us land. Mm-hmm. So first thing, we have to be brought back to peace with Yah. Mm-hmm. We have to be, as we're being brought back to peace with Yah, he's bringing us back to peace and restoring us. So he's restoring us and reconciling us to himself. Then he's restoring us and reconciling us to each other. And then he can take us and restore us and reconcile us back to the land. So that's the process of Yah's restoration and making restitution. And then Yah will deal with our enemies and those who have come against us. So that's Yah's process of being able to take us through, versus reparations and just putting a bandage on the wound. Because reparations will never restore us.
It's a quick fix.
Right. It's putting a band-aid on it.
Right.
It'll never fix what our problem is.
What was the three things that you just named? You said one.
Back to him.
Restoring us back to Yah. Reconciling and restoring us back to Yah, back to the Most High.
Right.
Then restoring us back to each other.
Oh, okay. Back to Yah.
Which is what we're going through this process of re-establishing community and learning how to walk in love and operate in the Torah and restoring our culture. And then he can restore us back to the land and back to the kingdom and back to the fullness of the peace that he has for us. But if he brought us back to the land now, we would just defile it again. So Yah has a process that he goes through.
I just wanted to read this 18th verse. This Ben Elohim is supreme, and it's talking about Yahushua. It said, In verse 18, he is the head of the body, his community.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in all things. I just wanted to read the way it was worded about community
Yeah.
in that.
So Yah is restoring us and bringing us back to shalom, back to peace, back to this wholeness through his process of restitution and restoration. So let's turn to Exodus 31.
All in my lesson.
Hmm.
That's good. That's good. In my lesson is his lesson.
Verse 12, 31 verse 12. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, And you speak to the children of Israel, saying, My Sabbaths my Sabbaths you are to guard by all means, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, to know that I, Yahuwah, am setting you apart. And you shall guard the Shabbat, for it is set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death. For anyone who does work on it, that being shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days' work is done, and on the seventh is a Sabbath of rest, set apart to Yahuwah. Everyone doing work on the Sabbath shall be certainly put to death. And the children of Israel shall guard the Sabbath to perform the Sabbath throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant. Between me and the children of Israel it is a sign forever. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. So Yahuwah is telling the children of Israel that the Shabbat is a sign of the covenant. So the Shabbat is a sign. So we're talking about the covenant of peace and the covenant that he made with us. And the Shabbat is the sign that he gave to us of that covenant. It's a sign. And Yahuwah talks about this sign and this covenant repeatedly throughout the scriptures. He talks about the Shabbat repeatedly to the people and how it's a sign of the covenant. So he says, you shall guard the Shabbat, for it is set apart to you.
Where are you?
Verse 14.
Are you in Ezekiel?
I'm in Exodus.
Oh, Exodus.
Mm-hmm. You shall guard the Shabbat, for it is set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death, for anyone who does any work shall be cut off from his people. So he's letting them know, verse 16, he says it's an everlasting covenant. So he's putting this he's putting this sign and this mark. And y'all throughout the scriptures, he uses signs and marks whenever he has a covenant. When he had the covenant with Noah, he made the rainbow a sign. You know, when he had with every covenant he made a sign. He made some kind of the covenant with Abraham with the circumcision.
Right.
It was a sign of the covenant. So he always placed some kind of sign over the covenants that he made. So the Shabbat is a sign specifically. The Shabbat is from the beginning, and we'll talk about that, but he gave it to Israel specifically as a sign of this covenant of peace. So it's to be kept to the fulfillment of that covenant. So when he tells them when he gives the commandments or whatever, he tells them to remember it. He's telling them to remember the Shabbat and remember this covenant that I'm making with you, because it's everlasting. The Shabbat is the everlasting covenant. So it's something that he's given specifically to his people. Go to Ezekiel chapter 20. verse 10. So I took them out of the land of Mizraim, and I brought them into the wilderness, and I gave them my laws, and showed them my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between them and me, to know that I am Yahuwah who sets them apart. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my laws, and they rejected my right rulings, which if a man does, shall live by them. He shall live by them. And they greatly profaned my Sabbaths. Then I said I would pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness to consume them. But I acted for my name's sake, not to profane it before the nations, before whose eyes I had brought them out. And I myself also lifted my hand on an oath to them in the wilderness, not to bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, the splendor of all lands. Because they rejected my right rulings and did not walk in my laws, and they profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. And my eye pardoned them from destroying them, and I did not make an end of them in the wilderness. And I said to the children in the wilderness, do not walk in the laws of your fathers, nor observe their rulings, nor defile yourself with their idols. I am Yahuwah your Elohim, walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and do them, and set apart my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, to know that I am Yahuwah your Elohim. But the children rebelled against me, they did not walk in my laws, and in my right rulings they did not guard to do them, which if a man does, he shall live by them. They profaned my Sabbaths, so I resolved to pour out my wrath on them to complete my displeasure against them in the wilderness. So he talks here about how he's continuing to try to make this mark with them with the Sabbath, but they're continuing to profane it. They're continuing to defile it. For some reason, keeping the Sabbath set apart was like a hard thing for Israel, being able to keep that set apart. And Yah, we saw in the other verse where Yah said it was punishable by death. So it was different transgressions that had things that you could make restitution for the transgression or whatever. But when it came to the Shabbat, it was something that was punishable by death. So it was something that it wasn't like you can do something to make up for it. But apparently there was this constant breaking of the Shabbat, and there was nobody executing judgment on it. So it was being done, and the thing was you're supposed to be stoned to death or whatever. But apparently nobody was actually doing it. So it was continually being defiled, and there was no, a lot of times the scripture y'all talks about you not having right ruling. There's no right ruling amongst you. There's no righteous judgment amongst you. So this is one of the things where there was no righteous judgment going on. It was just continually being allowed to be defiled, and the covenant was being continually defiled. So in Genesis 2, it talks about how the Shabbat came on the first seventh day. It says that Yahuwah blessed the seventh day and set it apart. Genesis 2 verse 2, and Elohim blessed the seventh day and set it apart, because on it he rested from all his work which Elohim in creating had made. So the day is blessed and it's set apart. So we know a lot of people will say every day is the same and you can worship Yah any day, but Yah said that the seventh day is blessed and it's set apart. So he put a blessing on the day, and he set apart the day from all the other days. So the same thing he did with Yisrael, he calls Yisrael to be a set apart people to himself. So he gave his set apart people this set apart day as a mark and a sign for the covenant that he's promising them in the midst of all these captivities and trials that they're going through. He's promising them this peace that's going to come, this restoration, this kingdom that's going to come. And he's giving them the Shabbat, this seventh day of rest and ceasing from labor, and to enter into as a promise, as a sign of what's going to come in the kingdom. Because we know the seventh day represents the 1,000-year reign that's going to be on the seventh day. So that 1,000-year reign, when we're going to reign on the earth, is symbolic and parallels the seventh day Shabbat. So this rest that we're going to enter into is congruent with that. So every seventh day, he's giving us a sign and a remembrance and something to look forward to, that I'm promising you this rest that's going to come, this Shabbat, this reign, this restoration of the kingdom that's going to come, where you're going to find rest and find peace. So every seventh day, he's reminding us of this and bringing us back into that mindset and giving us an opportunity. So while it's a physical rest, it's also a spiritual rest of being able to have that assurance of what's to come in the future. also in, let's look at Exodus 16. So on your paper, skipping over a couple of things, but it says that it was given to Yisrael. If you have the book of Jubilees, if you read Jubilees chapter 2, it talks about how the Shabbat was given to Yisrael. Kind of what we've already read, but it kind of goes into it some more. In Jeremiah 17, it talks more about how Israel refuses to obey. Like Israel just won't do it. He's like, okay, if you just do this, if you just keep my Shabbat, you know, this is what I'll do for you, you know, and they just won't do it. And stay where you are. I'm gonna read Jeremiah 17. It's on your paper. 19. It says, verse 20 says, and you shall say to them, hear the word of Yahuwah, you kings of Yehuda and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem who enter by the gates. Guard yourselves and bear no burden on the Sabbath day, nor bring it in by the gates of Jerusalem, nor take a burden out of your houses on the Sabbath day, nor do any work. And you shall set apart the Sabbath day as I commanded your fathers. But they did not obey or incline their ear, and they made their necks stiff, not to hear and not to receive instruction. And it shall be, if you diligently obey me, declares Yahuwah, to bring in no burden through the gates of the city on the Sabbath day, and set apart the Sabbath day, to do no work in it, then kings and heads sitting on the throne of David shall enter in through the gates of the city, riding in chariots and on horses, and they in their heads, the men of Yehuda, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And the city shall be inhabited forever. So he's telling them, just keep the Shabbat. Will establish, your kingdom will be established. And it says in 27, but if you do not obey me to set apart the Sabbath and not to bear a burden, when entering the gates of Jerusalem on the Sabbath day, then I shall kindle a fire in its gates, and it shall consume the place of Jerusalem and not be quenched. So, for some reason, our people are just, they're not getting the whole idea of the Shabbat. In Numbers 15:22, it talks about how the first time after he gave the commands, and it says that the guy was gathering sticks, he was gathering wood, and they were like, it was Shabbat, he was gathering wood, and they said, what are we supposed to do? And he said, stone him. So they brought him out to the people, and they stoned him. So that was the first punishment, judgment for breaking the Shabbat. And after that was when Yah gave them the command to wear the tzitzits as a reminder. So that right after that, it was when he spoke to them. He said, wear the tzitzits on the corner of your garments throughout your generations, so that it can be, so that you'll see it and remember the commands of Yahuwah and do them, and not search after your own heart and your own eyes after which you went horn, so that you remember and shall do all my commands and be set apart unto Elohim. I am your Elohim who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim to be your Elohim. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. So he's telling them not to search. What his observation was based on this thing, he says, do not search after your own heart and your own eyes after which you went horn, so that you remember and do my commands. So he's saying there's something in your heart that's looking for other things, that's causing you to go astray. So he's telling them to do this so that you can see it and remember. So what do I have? I told you to go to Exodus 16. So this is when they came out of Egypt, and they're in the wilderness, and Yah is trying to teach them. He's trying to teach them this principle of the Shabbat, and he's this is where the manna is coming down, and he's trying to give them instructions. So remember, when they're in Israel, right? So when they're in Egypt, they're coming from a place of bondage, right? So where they're working, hard labor is on them, So you would think that to have this rest would be something welcome. You would think that would be something that they would easily go into. But even coming out of Egypt, coming out of all the captivities, it's something in them that's competing
Mm-hmm.
with them. So you would think that they would want to lay these burdens down, but it's almost like, you know, we go from having, sometimes when you have freedom, like we go from having these external slave masters which is telling you, okay, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to do, and somebody on the outside is putting all this pressure on you. But then when that's released, it's like you're left to, you have these things inside of you that's driving you, and that's causing you to, you know, you have these competing things in your own heart that's causing you to put yourself in a burdening place because you have desires. And you think about today, like seventh day can be hard. Like when I first came into it, it was like, okay, I was doing business, so I'm like, I don't like to put down my business, you know. So the seventh day was like, I mean, literally at first I'd be like, okay, like sun's down,
Yeah.
all right, let's go.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I'm like, this is not right. This is not how I'm supposed to feel about this, you know. But it was like hard for me to stop from my own interest and desires and things that I had wanted to do.
Yeah.
Things were driving me, you know. Other than that, so to enter into a rest was like, wasn't something that I was looking forward to, you know. So with them, it seems to have been the same thing, that they had these competing desires. It was things that they had in their hearts, that either they were going after idols, doing idolatry, they were going after the marketplace, they were going after just their own desires, and their mind was just not on the things of Yah. Their mind was on other things. So in Exodus, so they're coming out of this, right out of this captivity, this hard labor that Yah delivered them out of. So Yah's trying to teach them about the Shabbat. So in Exodus 16, it says, let's see, start at verse. Start at verse.
Before.
Let's start at verse 16. This is the word which Yahuwah has commanded, that every man gather it according to each one's needs. So he's talking about this you know, he has the manna, and he has the quails that's coming down in the evenings, and in the morning the manna is coming down. He says, this is the word which Yahuwah has commanded, let every man gather it according to each one's need, an omer for each being, according to the number of beings. Let every man take for those who are in his tent. The children of Israel did so, and gathered some more and some less. They measured it by omers, and he who gathered much did not have too much. He who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered according to his needs. It sounds kind of like in Acts when they talked about how they distributed things according to need, when nobody had too much or too little.
Mm-hmm.
And Moshe said, let no one leave any of it until morning. And they did not listen to Moshe. So some of them left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moshe was wroth with them. And they gathered it every morning, each one according to his need. And when the sun became hot, it melted. And it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. And the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe. And he said to them, this is what Yahuwah has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath, set apart to Yahuwah. That which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook. And lay up for yourselves all that is left over, to keep it until morning. And they laid it up till morning, as Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worms was in it. And Moshe said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to Yahuwah. Today you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there is none. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found none. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, how long shall you refuse to guard my commands and my Torah? See, because Yahuwah has given you the Sabbath, therefore he has given you bread for 2 days on the 6th day, that each one stay in his place. Do not let anyone go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. So he's telling them, so he basically is telling them, like, okay, he's giving them their daily bread. We've talked about that. He's giving them their daily bread each day. You have enough bread for that day, but on the 6th day, he gives them enough for the 6th day and for the 7th day.
Yeah.
You know, so he's saying, you know, what's left over, this is the only day of the week where whatever's left over can be eaten the next day. And he allowed it to not spoil for that next day. So, but it shows that some of the people still went out. Well, let me go see if it's really was out there or if it's not out there. So they went out in the fields anyway to see if they could find some on the Shabbat. And there wasn't none out there. Because y'all already done told them, you know, I'm giving it, get it prepared on the 6th day. You know, so 2 things out of that. First of all, Yah wants us to prepare when it comes to the Shabbat. He wants us to have an attitude of preparation. So
Yeah.
he's telling them on this 6th day, prepare for the Shabbat. So
That's right.
so that on the Shabbat you don't have to go out and do these things. You know, so when we approach the Shabbat, we have to have an attitude of preparation. And he was trying to teach them this principle. So it's two things here. Is first of all, it's preparation. And that's something that, you know, that we have to think about today. Like, are we preparing to enter into the Shabbat? You know, preparing what we need for the Shabbat so that on the Shabbat we don't have to go into the marketplace. We
Right.
don't have to stop to get food. We don't have to, we're not hustling to do things on the Shabbat, because on the preparation day, our mind is set to prepare for the Shabbat. So just like he told them on the 6th day, prepare all the food that you're going to need for the 7th day, so that you're not hustling on the 7th day. So it's a mindset of preparation, and it turn to Matthew 25. And this mindset of preparation for the weekly Shabbat is what prepares us to be able to enter into the eternal Shabbat. We have to, Matthew 25, we have to have the same mindset of preparation
Huh.
So verse 1 says, the kingdom of the heavens shall be compared to 10 maidens who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise and 5 foolish. Those who were foolish, having taken their lamps, took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their containers with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom took time, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was heard, see, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. Then all those maidens rose up and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, give us of your oil, because our lamps are going out. But the wise answered, saying, no, indeed, there will not be enough for us and you. Instead, go to those who sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. And later the other maidens also came, saying, Master, Master, open up for us. But he answering said, truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, because you do not know the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. For it is like a man going from home who called his own. Let's stop there. Watch therefore, because you do not know the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. So the foolish virgins were not prepared, but the wise virgins had already had their oil. They had enough to need, so that they didn't have to go out. So the other ones had to go out, and they missed the opportunity when the bridegroom came. You know, so Yah is trying to teach us the principle as we have the mindset of preparing to enter into this rest on a weekly basis, and being prepared so that we're not caught off guard, and that we're not bringing something into the Shabbat that doesn't belong in that space. Then he's teaching us how to be prepared for this covenant of peace that we're going to enter into, so that we're not caught off guard, and we're prepared in our hearts and our minds, and our spirits are in the right place to be able to enter into that space. So he's bringing us to be able to be prepared. So we have to think about the Shabbat as
Excuse me, is this a real scenario, or is this because it says
It's a
kingdom of heaven
parable.
at the time will be like?
It's a parable.
It's a parable.
Okay.
So he's saying that this is what the kingdom will be compared to. You know, it's giving that parable of those who were prepared to enter in, and those who were not prepared to enter in. You know, so Yah gives us these things now, just like with all the feast days. Like he's giving us these things now that they're important for their own purpose, but then they have a spiritual significance that he wants to get us now, so that we're ready for that bigger thing when it comes.
That's right.
So it was two things that he was dealing with them in the wilderness. So that first thing was preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you prepare? Can you be prepared ahead of time, so that you're not bringing something in that doesn't belong in the kingdom? So the Shabbat being set apart. The Shabbat is already set apart.
Right.
Like it's already set apart. Yah has already set it apart. We have to set apart the Shabbat in our hearts. So it's is set apart already. So it's like if you think about, I don't know if whoever has a house that has like white carpet, you know, and sometimes when people come into the house, you tell them take off your shoes, at the door, outside the door, whatever, because you're entering into something that's clean, and you don't want to bring the defilement from the outside into that clean place. So the Shabbat is like it's a set apart thing. So Shabbat, the 7-day Shabbat, parallels the kingdom. That's a set apart thing.
Yes.
So in Revelation, it talks about how no profane thing will enter into the kingdom. It's on your, I think it's on your paper. It's not on your paper, but Revelation 21:27. You can write it on your paper. It talks about how no profane thing is going to enter into the kingdom. No defiled thing is going to enter into the kingdom. So this 1,000-year reign, nothing defiled is going to enter into that space. So when it comes to the Shabbat, no 21:27. Revelation 21:27. So it talks about no undefiled thing being accepted into the kingdom, because the kingdom is set apart.
Yes.
So when we enter into the Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat that we have now, it's already set apart. So we got to take our shoes off before we enter into it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's set apart. So we don't want to bring any profane thing or anything defiled into the Shabbat. So in order to do that, we have to prepare ourselves to enter into it, so that when it comes, we're not doing all the things that he told us not to do on Shabbat. You know what I mean? We're not taking care of our own business, basically. We're not carrying burdens into the Shabbat. We're not going into the marketplace on the Shabbat. We're not doing all these things that are common, you know, that are common things, everyday customary things. We're not bringing those things into that set apart space. We're entering into it in the same way that we're going to enter into the kingdom, and no defiled thing is going to come into the kingdom in that 1,000-year reign.
Is it wrong for me to go out and do, like, you know, when I do my singing on Saturdays? Is that wrong? It is?
That's between you and the Lord. We have grace now, but
Ask it again when we get to the end. If it's still a question. If it's still a question. Turn to Hebrews chapter 3. While you're there, I'm gonna read Nehemiah 13. Nehemiah 13, it talks about so in Nehemiah is the time period where they came out of Babylon. So in Nehemiah they were coming out of Babylon. They came out of another captivity, and so this restoration is happening. So they're trying to get things back in order. They're going back to the land. They're trying to get things back in order, and things have been messed up for for the years they were in Babylon for 70 years. And so Nehemiah is trying to get things in order. So in Nehemiah 13, he's talking about. So he talks about. He notices that something is going on. He says that he noticed that in verse 16. He noticed that verse 15. He says, "In those days I saw in Yehuda those treading wine presses on the Sabbath, bringing in sheaves, loading donkeys with wine, grapes, and figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So I warned them on the day that they sold food. And the men of Zor dwelt there, bringing in fish and all kinds of goods, and sold them on the Sabbath to the children of Yehuda and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Yehuda and said to them, what evil matter is this that you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do the same? That our Elohim brought all this evil on us and on this city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath." You're saying like, yo, didn't like the reason why we just came out of the captivity we just came out of is like for this right here. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So it says it came to be when the gates of Jerusalem were shaded before the Sabbath, when it started to get dark, that I commanded the doors to be shut and commanded that they should not be open till after the Sabbath. So we shut the gates so that these people couldn't come in. He says, and I stationed some of my servants at the gates so that no burdens will be brought in on the Sabbath day. And the merchants and the sellers of all kinds of wares spent the night outside Jerusalem once or twice. So a couple times they spent the night outside the gates. And then it says, and I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do it again, I lay hands on you. I like that part.
Yeah.
It's like I lay hands on you. From that time on, they came no more on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves and they should come and guard the gates to set apart the Sabbath. Remember me, he's saying, remember me, O Elohim, concerning this also, and pardon me according to the greatness of your loving commitment. He's like, y'all, you see me, right? I'm trying to get this in order.
Yes,
Like, remember me, I tried.
Right.
And yeah, so he's trying to get that back in order, but it was the marketplace thing that they were struggling with. Then they still continuing in the marketplace doing the Shabbat. And this is after the Babylonian captivity. So we're fresh out of captivities and we're still like doing our own thing. But Hebrews 3 brings to light the other issue, the other thing that he was trying to show them in Exodus when he was trying to teach them about the day by day trust. It says, chapter 3, verse 1. Therefore set apart brothers, partakers of the heavenly calling, closely consider the emissary and high priest of our confession, Messiah Yahushua, who was trustworthy to him who appointed him, as also Moshe in all his house. For this one has been deemed worthy of more esteem than Moshe, as much as he who built the house enjoys more respect in the house. For every house is built by someone, but he who built all is Elohim. And Moshe indeed was trustworthy in all his house as a servant for a witness of what will be spoken later. But Messiah as a son over his own house, whose house we are, if we hold fast the boldness and the boasting of the expectation firm to the end. Therefore, as the set-apart Spirit says, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion, in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tried me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore I was grieved with that generation, and I said, they always go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. And I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest. Look out, brothers, lest there be in any of you a wicked heart of unbelief in falling away from the living Elohim. It said a wicked heart of unbelief, of untrust, lacking trust. And that was the thing that they were dealing with when y'all was telling them, to take this up on the 6th day and not on the next day. Like they couldn't trust. When he first told them to take the manna and I'm gonna give you manna every day, I'm gonna give you manna. They were like, I'm gonna take more extra for tomorrow just in case he don't give me none for tomorrow. You know what I mean? So it's like they couldn't trust him. So even as we enter into the Shabbat, like I talked about not being able to put the business stuff down for, it's like it's a lack of trust that things. It's a lack of preparation, and then it's a lack of trust, not wanting to let go of things and just really trusting Yah to enter into his space of rest and not letting go our own stuff that we got going on in our hearts. He says, why do you always stray in your hearts? So it's a trust thing of being able to trust, to prepare to be able to enter in, and then to trust Yah that he will provide, what needs to be provided in that time if we trust him and enter into that rest.
Is that the second thing?
Mm-hmm. Trust. And in verse 19 it says, we see that they were unable to enter in because of unbelief. Because of their unbelief, they weren't able to enter in. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering into his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed the good news was brought to us as well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, because not having been mixed with belief or trust in those who heard it. For we who have believed do enter into that rest, as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest. Yet his works have come into being from the foundation of the world. For somewhere it said that Elohim rested on the 7th day from all his work. And again it said, if they shall enter into my rest. Since then it remains for some to enter into it, and those who formerly received the good news did not enter in because of disobedience. He again defines a certain day today, saying through David, so much later as it has been said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, he would not have spoken of another day after that. So there remains the Sabbath keeping for the people of Elohim. For the one having entered into his rest has himself also rested from his works, and Elohim rested from his own. Let us therefore do our utmost to enter into that rest, lest anyone fall after the same example of disobedience. So he's talking about still two things. He's talking about that actual day and that rest, but he's talking about being able to enter into that future rest when it comes. Not having a heart of unbelief, and not having a heart of not trusting Yah, to be able to not allow us to enter into the place of rest that he has for us.
Amen.
So they went from the extreme of not keeping the Shabbat, not honoring it, defiling it. And then we talked about during Feast of Dedication about Maccabees, how they it became illegal for them to keep the Shabbat, to be considered a Hebrew or whatever. It became illegal for them to keep the Shabbat, and they had to hide and do all those type of things to keep the Shabbat. So then you have the zealous people that are saying, we're going to keep the Shabbat, to the point where they didn't even fight, for themselves on the Shabbat, and a lot of them perished. And then the next group came up and said, well, we're going to fight, and defend ourselves on the Shabbat, but we're going to, get things put back in order. So it went from that thing where they were zealous to keep the Shabbat, and to keep things in order the right way. Then it transitioned from that point when you go into the New Testament, and you have the Pharisees who made the Shabbat a burden. So the Shabbat came to something that Israel wasn't keeping, the children of Israel weren't keeping. So when you get to the Reparations, they're during Yahushua's time, the Pharisees had made the Shabbat such a doggone burden that it's like
You
could do nothing.
You know what's interesting? The next verse, after verse 11 in Hebrews 4, for the word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. Nobody ever points out what comes before that, piercing right through to the separation of soul and spirit, joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. No creature is hidden from him, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. Let the word decide.
Yeah. It penetrates the heart, and it gets in the middle of your intentions and all those things going on in the heart. That's never been read in connection with what
never.
comes before it.
It sheds a whole new light on it. Opens it up.
So during that time, the Pharisees added all kinds of stuff. I'm not gonna read this whole thing here. They talked about not even. So they had all these headings of things to not do, and then under the headings they added all these extra things. So it said not to grind food and stuff like that, not to in the field and stuff grinding. But then under, which is correct. But then under that it says not breaking or dividing things which were united before. So you can't break nothing in half. You know what I mean? So it just would add all these extra things that were just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Under the category, okay, well, don't do this, all right. So that means you can't do this, you can't do that, So it has all these extra things that they added to it that what made it a burden on the Shabbat. So that's where Yahushua comes in. So we see Yahushua, doing things on the Shabbat, and then the Pharisees are confronting him like, oh, well, you can't heal people on the Shabbat and this and that. And we'll go to Luke 13. Luke 13.
I just, off the top of my head, did he do any, outside of healing people, did he ever do anything else that was talked about in the Bible?
In Luke 13, it talks about when he heals. So basically he would heal on the Shabbat, and you'll see certain times where they said after the sundown, they would bring the people out. After sundown, they would bring people out who need to be healed or whatever, but Yahushua would heal them regardless. So one of the things that they had in here was you can help, say you can patch somebody up on the Shabbat, but you can't heal them. So
Right.
you can patch your eye up, but you can't actually heal their eye on the Shabbat, which was
You can't work on them.
Yeah, you can't you can't work on them, but you can like
Right.
patch them up. Like that's literally written down here somewhere.
And remember he talked about, when he was speaking back to them, he gave them the parable of if the cart had fallen in a ditch,
Yeah,
you know, you're not gonna help the man out the ditch.
yeah,
You're just gonna let the
Let him lay
animal
there.
and the thing lay there.
yeah.
Let
they
the
wouldn't.
animal in the cart lay there.
And they wouldn't, unless it was their animals. But it said, and it's written in their rules, if an animal falls, then they get the animal, make sure that the animal is.
See, that's,
See,
but I get, it's like I so see it now, because even though I always understood it, but you concerned about, it's back to the trust.
Yeah.
right,
You gonna help the animal, cause that's your profit.
right,
You
there
know
you
what I'm
go.
saying? That's your ends.
Yeah.
But you won't trust me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I'll heal, because what's happening is they have to trust him
Yeah,
for the healing to come.
Right.
So it's still a matter of trust.
Yeah.
You know, like the issue with the Sabbath, the issue
Yeah.
and like you know, we've been
Yeah.
reading in the heart was
Yeah.
you want to keep working and you want to keep buying and you want to keep doing stuff for you
Yeah.
and for what you get and for what
Exactly.
you gain from.
Exactly.
But when I'm telling you that I got you, I need you to trust that if you do nothing,
Yeah.
you know, I still got you.
Right.
You know, and if something were to happen where you're in need of me, meaning like, you know, like when she was talking about the cart, you know, you fell out, I mean,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Or you know how he healed, you know, and all that. But so it still comes back to the need. They needed him. You know what I'm saying? And so in order to receive healing, I have to trust this man can heal me.
Yeah.
So it goes right back to the trust thing.
Yeah.
It goes right back to that.
And the self thing. So, you know, so for their mindset, all the rules was like they couldn't do they could do the things that were beneficial to themselves. That, like you said, their profits and all the things like that. But when it came to something that was beneficial to somebody else, those were the things that all the rules were against. So I can make sure my ox is okay on the Shabbat, you know, even though that's work. But you can't be healed. Why are you healing people on the Shabbat? People can't be healed. And it's like, how does that how does that work out? Like how did the Shabbat turn into this type of thing where you're putting all these burdens on people, things they can't do, and you know, weighing them down, but you still are self. That's why you call them hypocrites. I'm talking last week about hypocrites. That's why you are hypocrites. You know, and you know, so that's the kind of conditions that they were in when Yahushua comes on the scene. So all the things back and forth when he's doing things on the Shabbat. The other thing that he criticized them when him and his disciples were going to place or whatever, and they ate the corn. They were going through the field and ate the corn. He was like, you can't eat the corn on the Shabbat. And he gives the example how David, when he had his meal with him, he ate the showbread in the temple.
Yeah.
And that wasn't, you know, he wasn't penalized for that. You know what I mean? So it's like doing good on the Shabbat is good. You know, to do good on the Shabbat, to do on the Shabbat, we're supposed to stop our customary work, the common work, the things that we do. We're not supposed to work or to cause anybody else to work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So everybody in our household, if you have an animal that does something, or you know, you're not supposed to cause any person, yourself, or any animal, whatever, to work on the Shabbat. That's supposed to all cease. And then we're supposed to stop buying and selling, because that's causing somebody to work also. If you're buying and selling on the Shabbat, that's causing somebody to work. That exchanging money and stuff like that. The marketplace, that's something that's supposed to cease on the Shabbat. So it's basically the working and the ceasing and carrying the burdens. And for us, it can go into, you know, because we can stop, and then our conversation and our mind can all still be on those things. You know what I mean? So I think that would go along with not carrying burdens into the Shabbat, not carrying those things. That you can cease doing the work, but still be there, you know what I'm saying, in your mind and in your conversation and what we're doing. So being in the mindset of putting those things aside, and remember that we're entering into something that's set apart. We're entering into something that's reminding us of the time that he's preparing us for in the end, to be able to enter into the kingdom. And he tells us, if we take pleasure in the Shabbat and delight in it, and not looking at the Shabbat like it's a burden, You know, I mean, can you imagine, like, he took them out of Egypt with his hard labor, they were crying out, and now they're acting like the Shabbat, this ceasing of rest,
Right.
is a burden to them. When he just delivered them out of this physical bondage.
Right.
You know, so, and this is the constant thing of our people. We get so caught up on our own stuff. Like, we get wrapped up in our own hearts, like quickly. The other sheet that I gave you, I'm not gonna. You can read it. You can read it as you go home. But I just want to pull out what is the gist of what it's talking about. It says the Sabbath returning to the covenant. And it's basically saying, it goes into the Hebrew, and it's showing how, if you read the last line, it says, on the seventh day Israel returns to the covenant. So Shabbat, while it means ceasing and resting, the actual Hebrew word looks at is returning to the covenant. If you look down at the paragraph, it says, we previously studied, a couple paragraphs down, it says, we previously studied the Hebrew word shuv, which means to turn. The Hebrew word for repent, to turn. The parent root of this is shav. It should have been written as sheen bet. So sheen is teeth, and bet is the house. So teeth in the house. So it means a pressing to the house. So the root of this word, and that's the root of Shabbat, the root of the word Shabbat, the sheen and the bet is the root shuv or shav, and it means a pressing towards the house. And it's the root of the word turn or returning. So the Shabbat is looking at a returning to the house. So the three letters, the sheen, the bet, the sheen is the teeth, this pressing, the bet is the house, and the tav it means mark or covenant or sign. So it's a returning to the house and a returning to the covenant. So that's what the pictograph of the word Shabbat kind of breaks down to. So through the keeping of Shabbat, Yah is trying to get the people of Israel to return to the house. The house, we've been talking about the house. So he's trying to get us to return to the house, to turn back to the house, and to return back to his covenant. And you can read over that some more. We'll probably go back another
Were
time.
you here when she gave us the alphabet with the yellow piece of paper? This right here.
I think I got it to you on Shabbat. Thanks, Rob.
Oh, she didn't have this.
I'll bring it to you on Shabbat. I'll bring it to you on Shabbat. Yeah, so it's a turning back to the house, and that's the whole goal of the Shabbat. Like, if you look at it as that parallel of entering into the rest of the kingdom, that seventh day is parallel in that 1,000-year reign. It's in the seventh day. You know, it's entering into. So it's like everything else he's given us as a mark. He gave us the Spirit as like a deposit and as a mark of the fullness that's to come. So he's giving us this as a looking forward. So when we say Shabbat Shalom, you know what I mean? It's like we're saying it now as entering into that peace, entering into that completion and that rest. But it's like a promise when we're saying it, like Shabbat Shalom is a reminder to us that, you know, we're preparing to enter into this Shabbat. We've reached the seventh day Shabbat, a seventh day entering in, and we're preparing and being prepared. And we have this promise that we're going to enter into this place of completeness and restoration and peace and wholeness. He's going to bring us back and restore the kingdom to us.
Yeah, because we talked about a lot of that on the side. Yeah. And there were no handouts. We didn't have any handouts on Saturday. No, I didn't bring any. I wrote up there.
Yeah. So that's what it is. So, you know, just to put it in the context of, as we're looking at peace and shalom, and we're looking at We've been talking about the covenant and entering in and looking at where he's intended for our people to get back to, and looking at that. So as we're looking at that and connecting the Shabbat to that, and taking it, just taking it fresh, like every year, every so often, whenever, like, Yah gives us more revelation on everything. The feast days, he gives us more insight and revelation. On the Shabbat, just to look at ourselves again and say, are we really prepared? Are we setting the Shabbat apart? Are we
Right.
preparing for the Shabbat to enter in? Or are we just doing it as a, it could be just church on Saturday instead of Sunday. You know what I
Right.
mean? And that's not what Yah intended for us. It's something for us to enter into with a mindset and with the, with the understanding, and to not fall into the same things that our ancestors fell into, but preparing to enter into it, setting it apart in our hearts and in our actions, and guarding it. Because he tells us, remember the Shabbat, to guard it, the Shema, we got to guard the Shabbat. And then, just checking our hearts to see where we are in our hearts with it, because it's going to parallel with what we are thinking about our overall walk, and with being prepared to enter into the kingdom, and not fall into the same thing that the unwise virgins fell into, and not being prepared. So just taking a look at ourselves and being prepared, and then looking at the trust issue of, are we trusting Yah to be able to enter into that space and to let everything else go, take off our shoes outside, and walk in and to be set apart in that space. He set us apart, he set apart that space for us. So there's so much to it, and it's a serious thing, a very serious thing to Yah. Like it's more to go into, but it's a big deal when Yah says something is a mark. Like, this is the mark of it. You know what I mean? When marks don't go away, we still see the rainbow today.
Yeah.
Right.
Circumcision was a big doggone deal.
It's still going
These
on.
curses, he said, these curses will be a mark, a sign that's going to follow you, and it's real. These curses or whatever.
Right.
And so when Yah says something is a sign and a mark, like it's like you could take this to the bank. Like this is something serious. So it's like, somebody, if you get married and they give you a ring as a sign of
Right.
that marriage.
That
You know what I mean?
covenant.
It's a promise.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you take the
It's a
ring and just
covenant.
take it and discard it, it's like, we still married.
Yeah.
Like what did you do with the sign that I gave you, the mark, so that the world knows? You know what I mean?
Right.
So Y'all saying this is something that, so that the world knows. So we don't want to be like the Pharisees and be hypocritical with it. You know what I mean? And saying one thing and doing something different, but like really entering in. And y'all's been just reminding me, challenging me to make sure that my mindset is that I'm really taking that seriously, to enter into that time and really setting it apart, so that, because Yah meets us there, and we come and he meets us here, we come and gather together, but the more that we really prepare ourselves and really take note to really do due diligence to enter in and to prepare and to set that time apart, like he'll meet with us even more. He'll see us and meet with us in our homes in the evening, and then when we come in, and we'll set that whole day, because it's the whole day. It's not just when we get together. And then afterwards we back to the marketplace, we back to the other issues of life. But really taking that time, and I believe that we'll see Yah really move even more,
Yeah.
and open up our understanding even more as we continue to guard that.
Amen.
Amen.
You get your answer. Kinda.
I did.
There's something else I was saying there about doing it was something I read that was good. It was just talking about doing what's necessary, doing good, doing for people, and doing what's necessary. Only doing work that's necessary. If I fall down the steps, I'm gonna hope a hospital is open. On the Shabbat. You know what I mean? It's not
Right.
like I'm gonna lay here until the next day. Like, it's necessary.
Right.
Somebody has to be there to do that work. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's things that are necessary work, but it's a question of, is it something that's necessary, or is it only necessary because I didn't prepare? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or is it something that's benefiting just for me, or is it something that is benefiting somebody else? You know what I mean? There's sometimes we can't, because we are still under this captivity. There's sometimes we can't help. Like, you may have to work on the Shabbat. You know what I mean? And but to the degree that we can help it, we should help it. You know what I mean? Like, They talk about the scriptures, different things that they had, work that they had to do, but it was like a rotation. You know, it was something you're not working every Shabbat, or you're not, you know. So it's a trying our best to be able to enter in based on the conditions. You know, and if it's something that's questionable, just I will take it to y'all, you know, and ask y'all, you know, what you know, why am I doing this, or is it necessary, or is this what you want me to do? Because we don't want to be like the Pharisees and just like, well, I can't help you. There was certain times in one of my old jobs that I had to work on the Shabbat. And like certain times they wanted me to do it for some random event, and I was like, nah. You know, there was other times it was like, okay, somebody's coming to give out hats to people in the community, or give out scarves and gloves. Like, okay, that's doing good. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I was required to be there, but it was like, okay, this is doing good to the community. You know, what I mean? This is something that's giving or whatever. So, but you know, not to set our lives up so that we're always breaking the Shabbat, you know. So it's just a thing of testing and checking our hearts to see what we're doing and why we're doing it. You know, and taking it to y'all.
And it's the thing too of the mindset that we've had about when Sunday was our Sabbath, and what was our mindset on a Sunday? It was for man's relaxation, to do what he wanted to do, you know, for himself. And then they started opening stores and saying, you know, that you were going to be working. There was a big uproar because, you know, people didn't want to work on Sunday. But they used the Sabbath, you know, that this is what we believe is us. This is the day, you know, this is the day set aside, you know, for God, like, you know. But all of that that's not even true, because it's still not the Sabbath. They got all twisted around at the Council of Nicaea when they changed the dates and made the days what they made them based on his paganism. So all of it's still wrong. You know, it's still not the true Sabbath. Yeah.
And it still was never like really set apart, because you went to church and then you was ready to get out of
Yeah,
church.
then
And
you
went
ready to
the
go hang
restaurant.
out. That's what I'm saying.
Like,
Yeah, or you went
Yeah,
and
you went and
did the
hung
rest
out.
of your day. A
That's
lot of
what I'm
people
saying.
did housework on Sunday.
Yeah.
Or Saturday. You know, like,
This is the Shabbat. The Shabbat is the seventh day of the week. On this day, Elohim's people are beckoned to rest and renew our relationship with our Creator, who also rested on the seventh day. Shabbat begins on Friday evening at sundown and ends Saturday evening after 3 stars appear. I was going to share that on the Sabbath too. So it's not like 7 o'clock, you know, because it'll already be dark some days at 7 o'clock. Some days it won't get dark until 9 o'clock.
Depends on the seasons.
Right.
I can see why they would use that as a marker, because,
Yeah.
you know, it changes. The time frame changes.
When I first started keeping the Shabbat and stuff, after I got into it, I would run at home. You know, the weather changed. I'm getting off of work, the sun going down. Get there before the Shabbat. You know.
Yeah.
You know, have my stuff set up and, you know, make sure
Mm-hmm.
you know, my shopping and stuff throughout the week. I know I've waxed a lot on it lately, and I'm trying to get back into the mindset of really having my preparation day and getting stuff ready ahead of time. So I used to like really be serious about it, like, you know, and that's what got me that's what got me realizing how important it was, because when I had to think about it, like, and think forward, like, okay, Friday being the preparation, or thinking at the beginning of the week, what do I need to do so that by the time the Shabbat gets here, I'm ready for it to enter into it without like I have to wash clothes, I have to do this, whatever. And that's when you start showing like this is the same way you got to live your life, you know, so that you're ready, you know, when I come, you know, to enter in. So you have to be thinking ahead. What do I need to do to make sure that I'm in everything in our life? Like, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm okay, that I'm ready in this area and I'm prepared, and not end up caught out there. You know.
Right. We gotta get rid of those old mindsets. I try to make sure that the main part of the house is straight, you know, before Shabbat. You know, and I just, because we all live together, I try not to push nothing, you know. But I do try to make sure, look, that the den is straight.
house together.
Yeah.
Can't be sitting here looking at this like this till Sunday.
Right.
Gotta get this stuff in order.